Hello guys, I'm Hunter Derek from Ogabo Corporation. In this video, we are going to be looking at June 2023 A-Level Computer Science, the practical session, that is the paper 3. We have already answered this question in a previous video, but we did it in the most basic possible ways, avoiding pointers. The purpose of this video is to present to you another solution, which I might call an advanced solution compared to the solution of the previous video. And in this video, we'll be looking at how to use pointer to solve that problem. I will recommend that before you really go through this video in the coding session, you review the concept of pointers in C programming language. And I will also advise that you watch the previous video where you will look at the details of understanding the problem statement. Our focus here is on the code. So let's dive straight into the question. So let's move into the problem. So here we are, June 2023, paper 3, A-Level Computer Science, section A plotting program, describing the task. Many interesting programming problems involving nested loops can be encountered when creating plots using a printer. Your task is to create a plot in figure 1. This is the figure 1 here, in a general manner with the size of the base entered at the beginning of program execution. Arrays are not used to do this. The grid lines are just to ease working with the figure. The lines are not directly needed to answer any question. A pyramid has a number of stars at its base, max number of stars, and is made up of rows of spaces and stars. Each line of the pyramid is made up of an odd number of leading spaces followed by a number of stars. There are blank spaces after the stars, but they are not important. Our task is to draw these pyramids. And when we are to draw this pyramid, we should take note of the base, the number of stars at the base. It is called the max number of stars. And then for each row or for each line, there is a certain number of spaces, or what we call the leading spaces, for this case, for the first line. And after printing the number of spaces, we have a number of stars, and then we have the blank spaces. They are saying these blank spaces, we should ignore them. Looking at this line 2, we have a number of spaces and number of stars. Let's dive straight to task 1. Problem understanding. So the purpose of task 1 is to evaluate whether you have understood the problem statement 1. A solution to this problem is outlined in the following algorithm. Initialize number of spaces and stars. Repeat for the current line. Output leading spaces. Output line of spaces. Adjust number of spaces and stars for the next line until number of stars is the number required. Mindful of the task description above, consider the pyramid of stars in figure 1 above and carry out the following. Romans 1. State the initial values for max number of stars. This is 1 mark. So we are just to state. Max number of stars are the number of stars at the base. So let's count. We have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11. So this value is 11. State the number of leading spaces and the number of stars of the first line. So here is the first line. So this is our first line. The number of leading spaces, let's count. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. The number of stars is 1. Romans 3. State the number of leading spaces, number of stars for the second line. For the second line, let's count the number of leading spaces. We have 1, 2, 3, 4. And the number of stars, we have 1, 2, 3. Romans 4. Between successive lines, the number of stars reduces while the number of leading spaces increases. Between successive lines, the number of star reduces, the number of leading spaces increases. So this is a case where we are moving from the bottom and going to upward. So in this case, the number of star reduces as we move to the top from the base. But in the question, so let's continue. Hence, by what amount should you modify number of spaces and number of stars before printing the next line in the pyramid if we print successive rows from the top of the pyramid? So if we are to print successive rows from the top, that is, we'll print the first line, second line, third, fourth, fifth, sixth. By what amount should we modify the number of leading spaces and the number of stars? We see that for the first line, the number of leading spaces is 5 and the number of stars is 1. For the second line, number of leading spaces is 4, number of stars is 3. If we go to the third, number of leading spaces 1, 2, 3, they are 3. Number of stars, they are 5. So you look at the difference. The leading spaces from top to bottom, they decrease by 1, and the number of stars, they increase by 2. The number of spaces decreases by 1. The number of stars increases by 2. Task 2. Program development. Choose either the Pascal or the C programming language to implement your plot of the pyramid of stars. So we have to implement this pyramid of stars. So 2. Using a suitable editor of your choice, write the following functions or procedures. So we have the procedure initialize. That takes the max number of stars, this one, the number of stars at the base. It takes a number of spaces, that is from the first line, the number of spaces we will need, and it takes a number of stars, that is the number of stars for the first line. This, that to initialize the variable max number of stars, number of spaces, and number of stars. So this is where the notion of pointer comes in. So we pass these variables to the function and then we modify those variables. Here is the function initialize. We can map between these two. You will see here number of stars. Here we have the max number of stars, number of spaces. We have the number of spaces here. Number of stars, here is the number of stars. So that is our input to the function. But now let's look at, whenever you see a star in front of a variable name, this is the variable name, max number of stars. The star in front of the variable name simply means it is a pointer. So it's a pointer variable. What is a pointer? A pointer is a variable whose content is the address of another variable. Looking at the function initialize, we have the same parameters as are given, but the only difference is that we have added a star to indicate that it's a pointer. So we are going to pass the address of a variable and then compute the address to get to the content that is stored within that variable. What Max is going to do is it will take max number of stars and in set max number of stars, take number of spaces, modify number of spaces. Please, we are going to modify this because we know that there is a formula. You look at the first video we discussed, is where number of spaces is equals to max number of stars minus 1 divided by 2. So we'll modify this program. The number of stars, we will update number of stars. So here is our program. We have here max number of stars, number of spaces, and number of stars. So when we call initialize, we will not pass the name of the variable. We add this symbol here, the ampersand symbol, or the and symbol, the ampersand symbol, to the name of the variable, which means whenever this symbol is placed before the variable, it refers to the address of that variable. So what we are going to pass here, whenever this function is called, is the address. So it's address that passes, that is passed to initialize, and then placing a star in front of the address refers to the content that is stored in that particular address. So each address in a memory, let's say if this is a memory where we can store some content. So a memory has an address section, and then it also have a content section. So when we put ampersand in front of a symbol like number of stars, what we are passing is the address. We are getting the address. Then when we come and do star number of stars, this one we are referring to the content. I hope we are getting it. That is the logic in this program. But for the meantime, we are just writing these functions using pointers. When we finalize our program, we are going to see how all of this works together to produce a final output that is expected. Romans 2. The procedure output leading spaces, which takes the number of spaces, n spaces, and output the number of leading spaces for a line on the screen. So this procedure would get n spaces, and then it will produce n spaces for each line on the screen. So let's write this procedure. Here is the procedure output leading spaces. It takes n spaces. So this procedure is exactly the same like what we saw in the first video. So what this procedure will do is, we are using a for loop to print. So to print a space, we just give a space between here. So you enter a space and it's going to print those spaces on the screen. Let's move to Romans 3. Romans 3, the procedure output line of stars, n stars, which takes the number of stars and output that number of stars for a line on the screen. So this procedure gets n stars and print them on the screen. So let's write it. So I will minimize these first two functions we have written already. I will minimize them. Let's focus on output line of stars. It takes n stars, and it's just exactly like output leading spaces. We're printing spaces in the previous procedure. In this procedure, we are going to print a single star n star times, which that is a function. It's as simple as that. We will see how we call it together. So we'll see how we call it together with other functions. Romans 4, the procedure adjust, that takes as input number of spaces and number of stars, and adjust the variables number of spaces and number of stars to the values used to print the next row of blanks and stars. The procedure adjust, that takes number of spaces and number of stars and adjusts the variable number of stars and number of spaces to the values used to print the next row of blanks and stars. Remember, in this program, what we do in this program is to print the first line. So for us to print our first line, we have to print the number of spaces for the first line, and later on we print the number of stars. And then the procedure adjusts, we need to go to the next line. We'll decrease the number of spaces by 1, and then we'll print the number of spaces, and then we'll increase the number of stars by 2. Here it was 1, so we will now print 3 stars. And then it will go to the next line. Before going to the next line, we will call adjust. Adjust will decrease the number of spaces from 4 to 3 spaces. We see them here, to 3 spaces, and the number of stars will increase from 3 to 5 stars, and so on and so forth. So we have to implement this procedure. So the simple logic of this procedure is that the number of spaces should be number of spaces minus 1. The number of stars should be number of stars plus 2. So we have the procedure as number of spaces equals to number of spaces minus 1. But since in this case we are using pointer, then the address is being passed, so for us to get the content, we'll put a star, and the number of stars will be, so we pass the address number of stars plus 2. Let's look at it in our editor. Here is the procedure. So typing it, we are going to have number of spaces. This number of spaces we will modify by decreasing them by 1. The number of stars, we will increment the number of stars by 2. Please, we forget to implement in defining initialize. Let's update number of spaces with the formula that we got the last time, so that we don't come back here doing the same thing over and over. Minus 1. So all of this you have to divide by 2. Question 3. Develop an algorithm given in task 1 as in a main program that calls the procedure or functions you implemented in task 2. For it, number of spaces, number of stars, and max number of stars presented under task description are stored in global variables. So here, so we should put this variables here as global variables. So for a variable to be a global variable, it should come somewhere at the top. So at the top, when we make it global variable, is visible in the entire program. Hint: the condition number of stars is the number required. In the algorithm, it could be coded as number of stars greater than max number of stars. So let's look at the algorithm given in the pseudocode in task 1. So here is the algorithm given in task 1. They say initialize number of spaces and stars, repeat for the current line, output leading spaces, output line of stars, adjust number of spaces and star for the next line until number of stars is the number required. So I did a flow chart for this same algorithm. So comparing this, the first thing we have to do is initialize number of spaces and stars. So we call initialize to initialize number of spaces. From our program, we see that max number of stars is sufficient to initialize the number of spaces and number of stars. And then we are going to enter a loop. Since we'll be doing it in C, we will be working on a do while loop. So for the current line, we output the leading spaces. We output the leading spaces. We output line of stars. We call adjust. That will adjust the number of spaces and stars for the next line. And then we check this condition. The condition is given here. But in this case, the total number of stars we have printed, we check whether it's equivalent to the number of stars at the base. So if the star count for each line is less than the maximum number of stars at the base, we keep running. If that is true, we go round. The day it becomes false, we exit. So let's implement this using our editor. Let's see how it will look like. Here is the do while, and this is the condition. The first thing, we output leading number of spaces. Then we output lines of stars. This one will print the lines of stars for the current line. We have, as you can see, we can link, and then we call adjust. What adjust does, modify these values. Then after doing that, we print on the next line until number of stars. You know that number of stars will keep changing as we move from top to bottom. The day the number of stars is equals to number of stars at the base, we stop executing. So let's run this program to see what we are getting. So the program is not working well because we haven't set the max number of stars. So I will just set max number of stars base. Let's set max number of stars to be 11, because in our problem at the base it was given as 11. Let's run it again. So okay, the problem is because we have not yet called initialize. So let me call initialize and see, and let's see how it will work. We'll pass it the address of max number of stars, number of spaces, and yeah, okay, number of spaces here we have to put 5. That is why the program was not working initially. The number of stars, let's run the program again.
Elevate your academic prowess with the Missing Pamphlet series. Dive into a treasure trove of knowledge that's engineered to propel you to the pinnacle of GCE exam performance. Brimming with a curated selection of past GCE questions and their meticulous solutions, updated with the freshest content, this guide is custom crafted for the ambitious learners. It's more than a mere steady companion, it's the arsenal you need to conquer the exam battleground. After immersing yourself in this enlightening video, seize the moment to claim your copy and embark on an exhilarating voyage in computer science. The blueprint to triumph is within reach. Grasp it with the Missing Pamphlet series. Your future awaits. Don't let this chance slip through your fingers.
It works well. So let's move to the next section of the question. Task 3, executing your program. Run your program for a pyramid of base 7 and test it to make sure that it works correctly. Screenshot the output of your program and save it in a file named task 3. Also print the screenshot, print a copy. So we should modify our base to be 7 in the program. We should run it and see. So I will just modify this to 7. We know that number of spaces will be modified based on the number of stars. So let's run the program again. And looking at the output, our program works well. This is, remember, we are using pointers here. When we are calling adjust, we pass by the address. We have the ampersand symbol. Task 4. Modify your program so that it asks the user to enter an odd positive integer, and then it displays a diamond of stars based on that number. For example, the value 7 will produce, so we should modify the program so that it asks for the number of stars at the base. So instead of initializing this to 7, we'll ask for the user to enter the number of stars. So I will just print. We ask the user to enter the max number of stars. Once the user enters the max number of stars, we will collect them and store them here. That is the first modification we have made. And we have to ensure that it will print this figure. So for it to print this figure here, which is an invert, there is a top down pyramid and a bottom pyramid. So I could recopy this logic. We'll recopy this logic to print the bottom of the pyramid. To print the bottom of the pyramid, and we'll call this function adjust down. Adjust down, we'll have to call it first. We have to adjust down first before printing. So leading spaces, and we call adjust down. So as we move from here, we see the number of spaces increases by 1, the number of stars decreases. So we'll keep calling, turning in the loop until number of stars that we have. We start with the max number of stars at the base. Number of spaces equals to 0. We'll keep calling the do while until the number of stars for the last one. We'll keep calling while the number of stars is less than 1. Now, why the number of stars is greater than 1. So we'll keep calling why the number of stars is greater than 1. So let's define adjust. But before we do that, we have to reset max. Here is our function for adjust down. It takes number of spaces and number of stars. The number of spaces will increase by 1. The number of stars will decrement by 2. So let's run this program again and see how our inverted star, how our complete pyramid will be printed. We enter 7. So the problem we have here is the number of the program works, but there is a little problem. You see, the base is printed twice. The base is printed twice because by the time we are exiting this loop, the number of stars is greater than max number of stars. So we have to set the number of stars to be equals to max number of stars, and the number of spaces should be equal to 0. Let's run the program again. So when we do that, you see it matches the number of stars should be the maximum, and we should keep decrementing and checking the number of spaces should be 0. Let's print again. Enter 7. So our program is working as expected. Romans 2 of question 5. Run your program for the pyramid of base 7. Test it to make sure that it works correctly. Screenshot the output of your program and save it in the file name tax3. Also print the screenshot. Print a copy of your program source code and attach it in your answer booklet. In case you are having issues copying and stress and you want to see the source code and move faster, you can go to GitHub. I will give the link in the video description. You download the code and may it help you. Bye.